you can mount an argument, Alvs, that the source of plenty of our problems at either end of the ground are due to a pretty dysfunctional and poor midfield for a long period of time now. Whatever the reason, mate, growth, talent, lack of intelligence, coaching, injuries, whatever that may be, it's been a struggle. Struggle this year under David Teague, struggle last year, and even struggle under Bolton. We picked up a couple of really handy recruits, but whether those two guys that we picked up are going to make us any better, we're just going to have to wait and see. But how have you seen it over the last couple of years, in particular under David Teague in that midfield group? And I talk in respect, Alvs, to the inability to defend as a midfield group and putting a lot of pressure on our back 6 and 7, and then obviously the poor execution going inside forward 50, which makes it even a harder job for our forwards.
I think the great man Mick McGuan summed our midfield up really well when he said, once the ball leaves our area, we're walkers. Obviously Sam Walsh isn't in that category, but yeah, it's so true, and it's one of the things we'll probably touch on shortly. You know, the challenges for Timmy Clark, but you know, our lack of leg speed and ability to be able to spread defensively when you're playing a shootout style footy as it is, it just stood out, and it's been a huge issue. Any midfield that's got speed, especially in their mids and spread, like we played Richmond round 1 last year, and I just remember Bolton and Dusty and these guys, they're just charging out of the midfield. Yeah. We just couldn't go with them. So yeah, that's what stands out. And then going the other way, you know, we had plenty of inside 50s and plenty of looks, but it's our execution, decision making, our connection with our forwards. We just butchered the footy, and that's just a lack of smarts. Even being able to put the ball to advantage side to a Harry, for example. Yeah, they every year as a supporter group, mate, and even from internally, we hear that the depth is better. And then it gets tested, whether it's, you know, through a lack of form, whether it's injury, the depth doesn't appear to be there. We've seemed to bolster it once again. But you mentioned Tim Clark, a bit of really a no-name assistant coach. He's been at Carlton, he went away, he's come back. We hear that term highly rated. What are some of the main challenges for him, Alvs, moving forward? Because he's obviously worked closely with Patrick Cripps in the past, and I think, you know, under Cripps' own admission, he probably played his best football when Tim Clark was the midfield coach. And that's a positive. Absolutely, that's a positive. So I think his challenges initially are going to be, because we've been such a one-way midfield for a period of time, is over summer, and it's just the basics. It's our setups and what are our expectations defensively. So, you know, once we lose the ball from a mark free kick, how are we setting up? What part of the ground we're covering? I just love for our midfield to be all on the same page come round 1. Okay, we looked at Melbourne; they're the perfect example. They all of a sudden, you know, my second point is being selfless and understanding your role, getting away from wanting to be 30 possession, 2 goals, best on ground, to at times during games, you know, for Clayton Oliver this year, he still had large numbers, but he might have spent 15 minutes per game where Bontempelli was out of control of stoppages. So Clayton Oliver took it upon himself to go and spend 15 minutes on Bont, reel him in a little bit, let the other mids get to work. So that's probably the big thing for me. Have our expectations defensively known to the entire group, then buy into being selfless, but understand what that means. Yeah. And then thirdly, I think on the offense side is our mid to forward connection, especially when you can have Charlie in that forward line with Harry. You know, how are we setting up? How are we using the ball? How do we set up to defend on the way out? So they're probably the three things I see with Tim that he's got to get right over summer. So some of that structure and system, but other than that, it's buy-in from the midfield to be selfless. Because at the moment, I don't see much of that at all.
Do you think, and we'll get to it straight away, mate, the big recruits, obviously Adam Chera, you know, pick 6 or 8 or whatever we have away from him, and it looks like to be a really strong midfield draft that's just gone. But we get a ready-made player. You spoke about those challenges that Tim Clark faces with our midfield group, and then Georgie Hewitt as well. Can you see those two boys? We'll start with Chera, but can you see them I suppose, addressing some of those concerns?
I think they fit needs for us, absolutely, and both in different ways. So Chera will bring absolute class. So left or right foot, and some of that decision making going inside 50, he will fix that, which is really important. I like the fact that he can also go inside. I watched him pretty closely late in the year once. It obviously was known that he was looking at coming home, and I was very impressed with how clean he is inside the contest. So, yeah, he will bring X factor and class, which we lack. So that's a big tick. I like the fact that he's had 4 years in the system, and he'll build with our young midfield group. So that's really positive. And then on the flip side to that, this one especially Hewitt, and he's only young still, like 25, but he will bring that defensive two-way running mid that obviously is a glaring hole in our midfield. So he'll be able to go and lock a player down if he's out of control. But the part that I think with Hewitt, where he's underrated, is he's so clean. He's so tough over the footy, but he doesn't fumble. So I think because he's been in Sydney, he finished second in their best and fairest in 2019. He's a bit underrated. Yeah, so I just see those two. They'll come in. They'll be in our best 18 straight away, and they should have a huge impact. They look like they're both really professional. Total buy-in with the group, so they're not going to rock up in the state that probably Zach Williams did last year. So straight away we're going to bring a couple of professionals in who are hungry to come in and make a difference straight away, which is really positive.
You mentioned a really good point, mate, about that age profile. Chera, 22 years of age. I just went through that profile in regards to what we've got on the list at the moment as that midfield group, and we've now got 5 players, Els, from that 2017 draft. Obviously, we recruited Beau. We've now got Chera. We've got O'Brien. Fogarty was in that draft, and the Conning. All top 30 picks. They're all 22 years of age. Dow's played 59 games. Chera 76. O'Brien 41. Fogarty 40. 22 to Conning. It's if we can get some of those guys, in particular O'Brien, Dow and Fogarty, to lift and reach somewhere near their potential. They're right in that sweet spot, that group. Maybe still young, but coming through together with Tom de Koning, it's a really nice age profile at the moment.
It's a great age profile, and it's a really good point you make. And yeah, if we can get growth out of those guys and their performance, lifts by 15-20%, they get continuity of playing together, then that's only a huge positive. And really, birth certificates, they don't mean that much, to be honest. Yeah. If you're ready and you're ready to step up and play, I mean, Melbourne had 9 under the age of 21 or something in their grand final side. So you look at that young Beau, he played 7 games and looked like he'd been there for 4 or 5 years. So, and that comes back to understanding the system that you're stepping into, what role you got to play. So for us, and I think we touched on this previously, that if everybody can be on the same page with that, our improvement will be huge straight away, I believe.
Where does that leave Ed? So we mentioned that age profile. It's a lot younger, mate. It's a lot younger. We lost Murph. Obviously, we lost SPS. We forget about that. I mean, obviously, he played down back, but he did go into the midfield at certain times, played on a wing a little bit this year. So we lost Murph. There's some experience there. Eddie, pinch hit across half forward occasionally, but it's a lot younger group, mate. Does that make Ed Curno's role more important, or do you see Ed's role now, I don't know, a little bit obsolete, considering we do have George Hewitt? Similar type role, I would say, but a lot cleaner, as you said, below his knees, and a very good user of the football, playing a similar role. Where does that leave Ed?
Yeah, I think Hewitt's a much better option for us, and that's no disrespect to Ed. I've loved his career and the way he's gone about it, but right at the moment, his spot in the side has to be in danger. Well, I'll take that probably a step further. I don't see him in our best 18 anymore, so he's probably somewhere between the 19th to 26th player on the list is probably where I see it. Look, he's still got a role to play at the club with his experience and his leadership and the example he sets with how he, you only got to look at his body for the position he keeps himself in, the way he trains. He's hugely popular as a teammate. But yeah, there's absolutely still a role there for him. It's just what that looks like, especially with, like you said, Hewitt coming into the mix. Kennedy's improvement in the second half of last year, and the fact that he can play forward, Kennedy. So, I really see him and Cripps sort of changing on ball a bit. So where does that leave Ed? Because for mine, unless he's playing inside, tagging someone, or the conditions are wet and slippery, yeah, I just don't really see him being in our best side. So, I mean, that might sound harsh, but there could be a horses for courses on what conditions we're playing. And I just don't see him playing every week. But at the same time, you know, you get 3 to 4 injuries to some of our grunt players, and all of a sudden he becomes an important player for a 6 to 8 week period. So, certainly still see an important role for him, but I just don't think he's a walk-up start every week anymore.
Is it purely midfield for Ed?
I think, yeah, I don't see him playing in our back six.
No.
Don't see him playing in our back six. I just don't think he's a natural wingman. We've seen how important that role has become in recent times. But he's played forward at times and been okay in periods, but we've just got more depth to go through there now. So I think he's off the bench. He's a rotation player, and then some weeks I don't see him playing. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting one as to how they handle that. That's for sure.
You mentioned the wings, mate. Let's get to it. And Melbourne, unbelievable. They rolled the dice with Brayshaw, went from midfield to the wing, probably more defensive midfielder, uses it well, very courageous, smart player. So you've got that. The top teams seem to nail that position, and they play there 90% of the game. So we've got Brayshaw, Langdon at Melbourne. Langdon, absolutely superb running machine. Geelong, you've got Isaac Smith and Menegola. The Dogs have got Hunter and Bailey Smith. Port have got Dersma when he got back, and Amon. Brisbane are an interesting one. They have McCluggage, and the other side's a little bit more of a rotation. And Sydney have got, they've done it right. They've got the young group coming through, and they've really, I suppose, put faith in the likes of Justin McInerney and Florent, which is going to hold them in really good stead moving forward. Us, on the other hand, we had this, I suppose, this notion of rotating the wingers and playing guys there, almost Alvs, like, where else are we going to play them? You know, at times we'd play Cottrell there because he can run, but he couldn't get the ball. You know, we saw Fisher there at times, but he hasn't got an engine. We've had Nunes play there who butchers the ball and makes poor decisions. So I see it as still a bit of a problem, but at the same time, are we thinking now that, is there an opportunity to really nail that position? Does it mean that a Sam Walsh or even an Adam Chera nails that position? Are we robbing Peter to pay Paul if we play, say, a Chera or a Sam Walsh on a wing?
It's a great question, and it's, if I look at our list, it's the wing's a huge issue still because it's such a specialised position. And I played a lot of footy on the wing over my career, and it's a really unique position where you can get caught in between a lot, but you've got to be able to defend at stoppage. You've got to be able to roll back a lot, help out across half back, but then you've got to be able to hit the scoreboard. So, I think you made a great point about Brayshaw. It probably took him a little while to accept it. Finished third in the Brownlow medal playing as an inside midfielder, but he needed to take on board, and this is me going back to that selfless attitude at your football club, that was the best position that he needed to play for the football club. And if that meant some weeks he had 12 to 13 possessions, but he got back and defended and covered space well, that was his role. He brought into that, and guess what? He won a flag now. So, unless one or two can pop up, can a Newman pop up and play that role on the wing for us? Look, it's a huge issue for us. I was hoping Doherty could go up and play there, but we obviously know that he's got his health battles at the moment. Probably the only specialist wingman on the list, and he's back on the rookie list, is Lockie O'Brien. So if I'm Lockie, I'm rubbing my hands together. You've got a new coaching team come in, a fresh start, new set of eyes, different opinions. If he can get really fit, play well in the practice matches, then he should be aiming to start on the wing round one and try and make the wing his own. He covers the ground. He broke 6 minutes for 2K the other day. So he covers the ground. He's got a nice left foot kick, but ultimately it's going to be up to him to grab his opportunity when he gets it, especially considering we just don't have any specialist wingmen. So, it's interesting, and that part of what we do and what Vossi and the team come up with really intrigues me. I don't have a lot of answers to that at the moment, but especially on Chera and Walsh, I can see Walsh playing a little bit of times because he's just got that attitude. He'll adapt and play whatever role, and if he's on ball or he's wing, he plays well regardless. He's a running machine, so I could actually see Walsh going out there a little bit. Do we want to have our wings there 90% of the time, like you said? That's an interesting part, because I'm not sure I want Walsh on the wing 90% of the time when he can go on ball and just break the opposition midfielders through his sheer work rate and desire and ability to hunt the ball. So it'd be interesting to see how that one plays out.
Ranked number 18 in the competition this year, mate, for disposals, our footy club. Really low disposal count. You look at the top teams in the competition, is it partly based on game plan? We were very much a kicking side this year. Will Michael Voss change that up a little bit? I saw it for the fact it could have been, were we a low disposal footy team because our inability, one, to win the ball, but what you mentioned before, mate, our inability to actually retain it and get it back. What do you think, Voss, the game style, what he's learned at Port Adelaide, what do you think he might bring? Do you think that will change, that low disposal count, that kicking game? Really, we don't like to feed it off by hand. We want to get it onto the boot. Can you see us trying to hold possession of the ball a little bit more?
I think all the good teams do, especially now with the new stand rule. I just didn't think we adapted to that at all. Or look at the other clubs, they'd have 7 or 8 kicks where they just own the footy for a period of time to stop momentum. We just never seem to be able to do that. And when we tried to do it, we turned it over with poor decisions and poor skill execution. So I certainly think we'll train for that over summer. I would be very disappointed if we were still 18th. That's alarming, to be honest. I definitely see a shift with that. I think we've got the grunt side of our game. We've got enough guys to be able to tick that off. Speed's an issue, no doubt. And that's why I think Paddy Dow, I'm hoping he really comes on because he's got that burst out of stoppages. We started to see it with Cunningham last year. He looked like he could be an important piece of the puzzle. He was breaking and bursting out of stoppages, and just reminded you of Joe a few times when he used to do it, and you were starting to think, oh, geez, we might have finally, the penny might have dropped and we have a player. But we don't. You look at our midfield. Where's the lightning speed? We just don't have much, do we? And that's why I posed the question last week when we had a chat. Could Sard get up higher? Could we utilise him a little bit more at times with his leg speed through the middle of the ground, but centre forward because he's such a beautiful kick on the run. So they're the things we've got to look at. I think for us as supporters, that's the exciting part with a whole new coaching team come in. How are we going to play? How are we going to use the ball? How are we going to defend the ground? Certainly I still look at our midfield and I still believe that the speed part of it is an issue.
Let's have a look at that centre square, mate. How do you see it? You mentioned some great points there about grunt. We've got the grunt, sort of covered. A lot of blokes playing similar type football, obviously Cripps, Setterfield, Kennedy, all pretty much inside midfielders. Walsh can win in his own ball as well in there, but it's the breakaway speed. So what's that balance look like in the middle? So we're going round 1 this year with a full list at hand. Obviously, Cunningham's not there. Probably only the real injury concern at the moment. Who would you like to see in the middle, and what balance in regards to a bit of grunt and a bit of speed away from that middle? That opening, I suppose, 4 in that centre bounce for round 1 against the Tigers.
I think if all things being equal and everyone's fit, I'm going with TDK as the first ruck. Yep. But in saying that, we'll need Pitt to play and step up at different periods because it's too big a ask for TDK to ruck for the whole year still yet, I believe. So, round 1, I'm definitely TDK. I'm probably Cripps, Chera, Walsh, the other 3. Get them in there. And then backing those 3 up are Hewitt, Kennedy and Dow. So that's probably the 6 that I see going through there at the moment. And you'll notice I don't have Ed Kerno, so I'm still not sure where he fits. But certainly Cripps, Chera, Walsh are ahead of him. And then I've got Hewitt, Kennedy and Dow, just for the simple fact that when you look at that 6 mids, Hewitt's the defensive mid, can play that role. Kennedy's grunt, but he can play forward. Same with Cripps. I see them 2 changing. Walsh can play wing on ball, and Paddy Dow gives us that explosion, which we lack. So, I just see Dow. He's just a crucial part of that. But the thing with Dow that I want to see, he's got a brilliant sidestep, but he always wants to handball first. We need him bursting out of stoppages, kicking. He's brilliant with his hands in close, like that. That's really impressive. But we need him breaking out of stoppages and hitting his kicks going inside 50, which he started to do a little bit late in the year. But I'm hoping he can take that to another level. So, and then Chera is the class. But still, even then, I'll look at that 6 that I've named, and they're not outside of Chera. There's not any of the others that you would say are A-grade kicks. I mean, Walshy's, but that's still a bit of an issue for us, our class through the middle of the ground.
Yeah, it's a great point, mate, because I noticed that as well. He's got great vision by hand, but we've got that in Cripps.
We do.
That's what we want. That's what we want from Patrick Cripps. We want him to get in close and to release by hand because he's not a great kick. And we don't necessarily want Cripps to be bursting away from stoppage, even though he loves doing it, it's probably a part of his game that he really wanted to try and develop. So where do you see Patrick Cripps at? What's eating him over the last couple of years? Is it a case now that does he necessarily have to be the best player in the competition? Does he necessarily have to be a Marcus Bontempelli or a Dustin Martin? Is it now about being selfless, about being, we mentioned leadership last week. So is it about getting back to what made him such a lethal commodity, I suppose, which is a beast on the inside and feeding that ball out. I don't see him as a viable option going forward. I would actually like to see him managed a little bit more, if that means a lot more rotations off the bench, so he is a lot fresher for that defensive running. I just don't think he's got great forward nous. And I'll get to a point in a minute about have we got someone up forward who can pinch it in the middle, but am I out of line here about Cripps not being a forward? Do you see it that way, or do you still think there's a future for him to rest forward and become a really dangerous option up there as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I take on board your point, and it's certainly something I've heard from quite a few people that he doesn't quite have that forward nous. I just don't think he's got the ability to defend without defensive running, Bucky. So that's a bit of a concern for me. First positive thing with Cripps was he had no off-season surgery, so that's a huge positive. It'd be the first time in quite a while, so that gives him a chance to go away, freshen up. His shoulders aren't banged up with surgery. He can actually get a bit of a base. Even looking at him last week training, I thought he looks fit. Like he looks rock hard. He looked really good. And I think the other thing for Cripps is just have a good system around him. No doubt he's tried to carry this side for years in a couple of pretty ordinary systems in place to play football, to be honest. So I see positives in that straight away. The big thing will be, if we want everyone to get on board with being selfless, I think if Cripps leads the way with that, then everyone else will get on board with it too. So, what that is, I'm not sure, but if somewhere there in the early part of our practice games or whatever else, he can have a role that might not be about him being the best player, and he embraces that, then that sends a great message to the young players and the rest of the group, much like the senior players did at Melbourne. So yeah, that's positive. I would define his role to play pretty much between the arcs and floating forward a little bit at times. And when I mean forward, I'm more talking about stoppages in the front half.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not more talking about him being a key position player. I think we tried that a couple of times where he was full forward and it just didn't work, and he was trying to wrestle all the time. But I can still see him in that part of the ground with contested ball, stoppages, being able to have an impact. That's probably where I see him playing. And swapping with a Kennedy, but it's more what work can he do in the front half in a contested situations more than anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely does, mate. We only had not one player ranked inside the top 25 in clearances this year. Obviously, Cripps was down in that regard, but we had Walsh and Cripps pretty much equal as our best clearance player. I want to pose a question to you, mate, and something I've been thinking about. All the good sides have a specialist impact centre square player who can go in there, not all the time. We talk about the likes of Jake Stringer, who can start forward but go in for periods of time. You mentioned that speed, break away from the stoppage. De Goey does it brilliantly. I mean, Dangerfield is the classic. Can go forward and be a very dangerous player forward, but then go in and change a game in the middle. Petrarca can do that. I've got one. I don't know. I looked at his numbers from his time at the Gold Coast, and that's Jack Martin. I don't think we've seen the best of him yet, obviously through injury. I don't know his attitude at the moment. Well, his attitude would be great, I think, with a new coach. But for me, he's the wild card this year. Is he that player who can be that hybrid forward? We've seen him kick goals. He's great overhead. He's a pretty good kick. He's good off the deck. But then spend, one or two centre square bounces and make an impact from there. I don't know. I haven't seen enough of him in the middle. But for me, looking through that list of midfielders, he is the one. He's the wild card for me.
Yeah, totally agree. And to be honest, if it's not now, it's probably never going to be. So he's
26 years of age.
26 years of age,
Yeah.
played a lot of footy, been around long enough. So I had written down here, who do we need to take the biggest leap? I've got 3 players that if they get continuity of playing, which means they've got to be super fit and they've looked after their bodies in a professional manner, Jack Martin, Zach Williams and Mitch McGovern, if those 3 stay on the park, get continuity, then that could have a big say in where we go next season. We know what we're going to get from Harry. We know what we're going to get from Cripps, Wiedering, Walsh, those guys. We know what we're going to get, but those 3 could really drive the football club forward next season. So, but that comes back to being professional day in, day out and adhering to those standards. So, but I take your point with Jack Martin. Outside of that, we actually don't really have another player to play that role that Big Owie Martin, Danger, Fife, those guys, do. So that's, I'd love Jack Martin to kick 25 goals, but be able to go on ball and impact with some clearances and stoppages. He's a great tackler as well.
Oh, yeah,
So,
definitely.
Yeah, so they're probably the 3. And then the other 2 that I think could take the biggest leap, and it's sort of D-Day a little bit for this guy, is Fisher as well. So he's good in bursts. We see glimpses. I understand he's had a couple of shocking ankle injuries, but he's another that if he gets continuity, he can provide some X factor. So if Dow can burst out, Fisher's got a great sidestep as well. So, but we need to see that on a consistent basis. And then the other one, he's got probably the most upside of any player at the club, is TDK. So another pre-season under his belt.
Oh, yeah.
It's super exciting with where he can go and what he can do.
You're playing both, though. You're playing both for at least the first half of the season. Pitnet, if he's fit, and TDK. Is that more of a rotation off the bench rather than, considering we are pretty well stocked forward of centre with, obviously, hopefully Charlie's right to go. You've got Harry, Jack, if he plays down there, depending where Gov plays. Are you seeing that sort of a rotation off the bench? I mean, TDK would want to get a fair bit of run in the ruck. Is it about rotating them off the bench, or can you see Pitnet drifting forward? I can't, but how does that work?
Yeah, I can't. And my concern with Pitt is I think he competes really well. His hit-outs to advantage are pretty positive, but he just takes no marks around the ground. So that's an area he's got to get better at. He had a lot of games last year where he's hardly taking a mark at all, full stop. So I don't like the thought of both of them playing. I think at times they'll trial it, and after the middle part of the year when it's it's cold and it's wet and you're trying to get through the season, they're a little bit sore. They might be giving each other a chop out, but initially, I think especially the first month, those games are super fast before the season calms down a little bit. So I think you want to have a mobile second ruckman as opposed to having TDK and Pitnet. So I'd probably, if TDK is fit, I'd play him on his own with the Galvins, JSOS just giving a bit of a chop out and backing up. That's only my opinion, but yeah, I can certainly see them rolling with both at different stages, that's for sure.
Just before we finish up, just a quick one on the following players. I'm sure a lot of supporters out there will want to hear your views on Will Setterfield. Where's he at? Just a quick one, mate. You see him part of the future moving forward?
I think Setters would need some considerable amount of injuries to those sort of grunt players to get a look in. So right at the moment, and he's one of the ones where we threw him out to a wing and he just looked lost and it's not his go. He's an inside mid, so if he wants to play, he's got to jump ahead of certain guys. But right at the moment, I can't see him playing at all early in the season.
Fogarty?
Fogarty's the same, so he's going to be competing with guys like Fisher and Owies and Durden and the like. I thought he started the season really well last year, more so especially with his pressure. I thought he was great early in the season. But ultimately in his position, I think on 5 or 6 occasions you ran in open goals from 25 metres and you either missed or didn't make the distance. So yeah, you want to make it or you want to play every week, that's got to be your bread and butter. You just got to pop them over the goal ump his head.
Nunes?
Nunes, for the simple fact that we still don't have those specialist wings covered. Yeah, I don't have him in the picture at all. I think if he's playing early in the season, then we're still going to continue to be a middle of the road side. But yeah, he's probably a handy depth backup.
Are you surprised we retained Matthew Cottrell?
Yeah, I don't quite understand that. I understand he's a great runner, but having watched him closely last year, he just butchers the footy and his decision making just isn't at AFL level. So I'd be very surprised if he plays at all.
The last one, We haven't seen a lot of him yet. First year player last year, youngest player taken in the 2020 draft was Jack Carroll. I don't know if you know a lot about him, Alvs, but he's one we could probably get pretty excited about what we saw at VFL level if we're talking about that specialist wing role. I don't know if you know much about him, but where do you see, I suppose, those second-year players like a Carroll? Is it about just sort of applying their trade at VFL level?
Even a Philp who missed last year and guys like that. So, Kemp as well, hopefully he can get some continuity of training and playing under his belt. So, and that's what you're always hoping, that a couple of those jump up out of the ground and surprise us and challenge some of the senior guys in their positions and put competition on for spots and, jump up and, if you looked at our list at the moment and you're a smart footy brain, you'd be thinking, okay, there's some openings on a wing here.
Yeah.
I'd go and approach your coaches. Just say, right, I need to be trained up a bit here. I said, if you're smart and you want to play senior foot every week and you've got good traits to play on the wing, I'd be going to learn that spot as much as you possibly could.
So you got Fisher and Kennedy playing round one as
I do.
Fisher high half forward, pinch hit in the middle, Kennedy possibly off the bench.
Yeah, I think I had Fisher on my interchange. I had Kennedy in a rotation with Cripps. Yeah, so I've got both those in my side. Yep.
Beautiful, mate. Well done again. Pleasure to have you on. I know it's hot up.
Thanks for having me.
Mildura. It's very warm down here in Melbourne. You probably look at my forehead. I'm sweating like a pig down here, but appreciate you again, mate. We'll catch up next week and we'll have a look at the forwards.
Good stuff. Thanks for the chat.
Good on you.